The Lakers get some bad news about LeBron James. Does sound like we're not going to have a lockout, which is good. Plus, the Eastern Conference is probably not open, but maybe a little open. This is Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your week. Appreciate you guys being with us and making us your first listen. We're available on so many platforms. So many. You can join us on YouTube. Catch a live version of the show on Monday nights here with this version of the show. You can catch us all throughout the week on podcast form, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for making us part of your week. Appreciate you guys being with us. My name is Matt Moore. I'm a senior NBA writer for the Action Network. You can find me on Twitter at HP Basketball. His name is David Ramil. You can find him on Twitter at DRamil13. He's co-host of Locked On Heat. I'm co-host of Locked On Nuggets. And we're going to talk about all things from the NBA on Monday heading into the Tuesday show. So on today's show, we are going to talk about the news about LeBron James and his unfortunate foot injury reported by Shams Charania of The Athletic. We're going to talk about the CBA negotiations also reported by Shams. Shams is running the slate tonight. And in the final segment, the Heat got a big win as well as the Knicks on Monday night. I kind of want to ask David about the forecast for the Eastern Conference. There's so much talk about the West into the East a little bit, but we'll start with the Western Conference because late Monday, Shams Charania reported that LeBron James is expected to miss, quote, multiple weeks with a foot injury that he suffered in the comeback win over the Dallas Mavericks on Sunday. James notably told teammates and trainers, "I heard a pop," but then returned to play throughout the remainder of the game. Charania, in his usual unique syntax, described it as multiple opinions are being sought. That was actually the thing that I circled, David, was anytime that you hear like they're going to get a second opinion or they're looking at a bunch of specialists, that's concerning. There's no official description of what the injury is, but it does sound like this is going to be lengthy and it's going to impact at least several weeks when the season only has about 6 left in it before the playoffs begin as the Lakers try and sneak in. What was your reaction?
My immediate reaction was that the Lakers are done. They're 12th right now in the Western Conference, game behind the Portland Trail Blazers, the New Orleans Pelicans, who are kind of hanging on right now. They lost in tonight's slate of games too. So there's enough teams there above the Lakers to continue to make things more difficult. I just don't see the potential for the Lakers to overcome the loss of LeBron. They made some smart moves at the trade deadline. Obviously, they've been playing better overall over the last couple of weeks, but I don't think it's necessarily enough for them to withstand the loss of LeBron. So I think this is another potential lost season where the Lakers will wind up missing the playoffs. But having said all that, I don't know that I trust, maybe not trust. I don't know that I can take at face value anything that happens with LeBron James and injury, because we've seen him overcome so many injuries over the course of his incredibly lengthy career, where something that would seem like it might take somebody out for the season is probably a timeout or two, just for him to be able to sit it out and just get back in the game and play at an all NBA level like he has usually done. So I'm not sure exactly where I am in terms of right now, whether or not I think they're done or whether or not I could see him bounce back within a week or two. Isn't there the possibility when he says multiple opinions? I also took that as a positive, that maybe they're looking for somebody to say, nah, you'll be okay. Just sit out for a week and you can pop back in. No pun intended, but maybe become available again for the Lakers in a week or two rather than missing a significantly more amount of time.
I mean, it's possible. I think even if you were to get a doctor to say like, no, he's fine, I don't know that's going to be the final deciding one, right? Like, I think it's more of like weighing whether or not he needs surgery now or later. Like, can you rehab it and maybe avoid surgery is usually where that consultation kind of comes from. Again, we don't know the nature of the injury. We don't know if it's a fracture. We don't know if it's usually with a pop, I would lean towards some sort of ligament tear. Yeah. But without knowing those kind of details, can't really speculate. We'll say that the Lakers have the fourth easiest remaining schedule by opponent. Now, I will say that when we analyze like these late season schedules, I tend to be a little cautious on that just because a weak opponent that's got a lot of motivation is worse than a really good opponent with none. Like if you're facing a really strong opponent that's got no motivation to win late in the season, that actually doesn't matter. Couple of notable things here. They do play the Jazz twice down the stretch. If James misses the remainder of the season, that could help Utah. They do have the Grizzlies twice here this week as the Grizzlies try and maintain control of the 2 seed. So like there's a lot of ripple effects from this. This season without James, the Lakers have gone 5-9. And so obviously like not great. They're a little bit more buffeted in terms of talent, but one of the concerns is D'Angelo Russell is also going to miss Tuesday's game versus the Grizzlies as his ankle still hasn't kind of gotten better. He's doubtful to play in that game. They got to get Russell back because they don't really have any other, like they don't have any playmakers. They don't have any shot creators. They don't have anybody else really to initiate offense. Look, I'll say it. This is an opportunity for Anthony Davis to step up and be the guy that he's supposed to be like the MVP Davis and carry the team. And it's just like we've seen this so much that I'm kind of expecting some sort of minor injury or for it not to work out. Like I have a hard time buying into the idea that Davis is going to be able to be the guy that he needs to be in the situation, mostly from an injury standpoint. You know, he's going to have to carry a very high usage rate, and that tends to wear him down. There are a bunch of ripple effects here, though. I think probably keeps teams like Portland very motivated on trying to make their way in. OKC probably now sees a little bit of a better opportunity. They also play the Lakers later this month. So there are ripple effects here, but I think the big question is just going to be, you know, do you think that the Lakers without James, do they have any shot? Even if they can stay 500, that might be enough with where these other teams are at to open the door, but they're going to have to go at least 500. You can't lose ground right now with them already in 12th. Your feeling is that they're not going to be able to hold that 500 streak.
Yeah, I don't see it. Too many holes there filled by a player as good as James and doing everything he does. So can I suggest that, you asked me my first reaction here, real tin foil hat moment here. But what if this is, we just got off of All-Star Weekend, right? And a lot of the talk about load management and things of that sort. Is it possible some kind of crazy scenario where this is all some incredibly set up drama where LeBron bounces back from injury, returns to carry the Lakers into the playoffs? And, here we are. The NBA says, see, our star players don't sit out when it matters most.
Yeah, sure.
And LeBron, preserving his legacy as one of the greatest players in the game, says, you know what? Injury can't slow me down, baby. Lakers, let's go. Is that crazy?
A false flag injury to alleviate the discussion. I think I have a hard time buying that.
So do I.
But I'm sure that Kyrie Irving is concerned. I'm sure Kyrie Irving is going to do his own research about whether or not there's a conspiracy. In more dour news, and on the injury front, we do want to note that on Monday night, the Charlotte Hornets' LaMelo Ball suffered a fractured right ankle in their game Monday. Just a nightmare of a year for the Hornets, for the Ball family, who obviously Lonzo's been lost for the year, and now LaMelo suffers this fractured ankle. The recovery time on that's going to be a year, so now you lose almost all of next year. Really unfortunate to see. Ball, I think, has had trouble kind of finding his way in the league after a really dynamite rookie season, but just an awful injury. And, you hope that he can come back and recover and be good to go, but it's probably going to be, he might lose all of next year too, given the severity of that injury.
Yeah. Sad news. Look, the Hornets aren't playing for anything now. And so you hate to see it. He was kind of just rounding into form after having missed time earlier this season with injury, and for him to lose that amount of time, it's just like the franchise just can't seem to catch a break. And I'm not sure what happens next in terms of the draft and everything else. Do they have their pick for next season?
Yes.
They do. Okay. So at least that's optimistic.
We'll see where they land in the lottery. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about some better news in terms of the NBA avoiding a lockout, some of the changes that could be coming to the CBA discussions. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On NBA. First, I've got to tell you about Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, you got to check out Built Bar. What makes Built so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% chocolate, but they also have amazing macros. Only 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein. All of that, and it actually tastes like a candy bar. It doesn't taste like a protein bar. It tastes like a real candy bar. I'm not sure how Built does it, but they taste like a candy bar while maintaining macros. And now you don't have to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking to you about Built.com and ordering them online. Well, guess what? Now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and you can get yourself a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or the coconut puffs. Hey, if you're close to Sam's Club, run in. You can get a 13-bar box with their hit flavors, brownie batter and churro. Churro is amazing. It is absolutely dynamite. Make sure you check that one out. You check out all the great flavors at Built.com. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Back here on Locked On NBA, David Ramil, join me, Matt Moore, as we break down all the goings on in the association on Monday heading into Tuesday. So earlier in the day, Charania reported on how much closer the NBA and NBPA are progressing in talks on reaching a new CBA. They've extended their mutual opt-out deadline. They did that last month, and they currently have a March 31st deadline to reach an agreement. The vibe over All-Star break was very positive on this front, and talking to several people that are in the know on such things, there wasn't a whole lot of, boy, I don't know if this is how this is going to go. Notably, back in 2011, the conversation at All-Star even was very contentious. That's the last time that we had the lockout. And there was just kind of an awareness of exactly how tense things were then, with the owners taking back a large chunk of BRI. This mostly, and this is a quote from a source, a highly ranked source involved in the players' negotiations, to Charania. We want to finish this deal soon and certainly want this wrapped up before the March 31st deadline. It's close. We need to dot the I's and cross the T's. That's great news that avoids a lockout at a time when the league, honestly, I think can't really afford any more negative press given the rest management stuff and everything, player empowerment, the trade demands. Also going into the new media deal, you don't want to waste this momentum when you have so much kind of to offer. One of the things I think that's interesting from Charania's report, David, is they're talking about rearranging some of the tax thresholds. Yeah. So what they want to do is they want to make it easier for certain teams to dip into the tax and make it a little bit easier on them to spend over. So probably widening the gap between where the cap is at and where the tax starts so they can spend a little bit more, and then making the super high spenders, your Clippers, your Warriors, making those more punitive to punish those. There's still a concern from the smaller markets about that. At this point, even I, like champion of yield small markets, I'm kind of like, guys, the playing field's pretty level here. You get a sweet revenue sharing deal. Maybe just pony up and pay the money here and contend. But do you think that the NBA would benefit from an altered structure as far as the tax payment go to adjust things on the salary side?
It makes sense, right? Allowing those teams the opportunity to go just slightly over so they can make those marginal improvements, maybe, or maybe even a significant improvement if they're that close. Like, Miami is one of those teams that I happen to cover, and they've been ducking the tax all season long, and a lot of fans are upset about it. Maybe if Mickey Arison, the owner of the Heat, is willing to or able to, if they do restructure the kind of tax situation that we're talking about here, if he's willing to make a marginal improvement to the roster in order to improve the team, maybe fans would be a little bit more sated. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. One of the consistent themes that you and I have been talking about all season long is the parity around the league. Anything that allows more teams to make those kinds of improvements so that they're not penalized for it, so that you can improve the overall level of basketball, I'm all for it. I don't see any downside to that. So I think the league would benefit from it as well. If you have more teams that are invested with late season additions, changes to the roster, that they could tweak their rosters. We saw a record number of buyers at the trade deadline, and I think that just generates more interest overall. So it all ties together. I don't see any downsides here. Do you?
I don't. I think it's probably beneficial. I think part of this is the smaller markets think that there's going to be a level to which the larger markets won't pay the tax. And like, I got news for you. Ballmer will pay whatever he's got to to contend.
You can afford it.
Yeah, like the ones that are willing to do this will pay it, and they make enough in those markets to justify it as well. I wanted to get your thoughts, especially on the age limit change. So, a lot of movement on lowering the age eligibility back to 18, enabling players to enter right out of high school, effectively destroying the one and done system, which, you can, if you're a college basketball fan, you're probably not a big fan. I don't know though, because without those players, maybe you actually have like more continuity in college, and maybe you can have more stories of guys that stay more than one season. The NBA and the NBPA have momentum on an agreement to terms that would lower the age to 18, but sources say the union is pushing for conditions that would facilitate veteran players providing tutelage and orientation to the high schoolers entering the league. This is a really good pitch, in my opinion, from the players union on this subject. So the players union not just doing this out of the goodness of their heart. What they don't want is they don't want the NBA and teams to replace spots for veteran players who are trying to prolong their careers with just these 18-year-old prospects, just filling up roster spots on the hope that somebody will be a star, when those guys won't provide long-term benefit to the union. And so the union is making a pretty good argument here to say, like, look, the last time that we did this, we had a lot of guys that were not prepared for life in the NBA as a professional basketball player. You need these veterans to help guide them. And I think codifying that process into a formal policy, whether that's like hey, if you draft somebody that's 18, you have to have like a designated veteran spot. Like you must fill that spot. Regardless of how this shakes out, to me, that makes a lot of sense, and you do need it. My favorite story about this is about Kwame Brown. It's it's sad. A Wizards assistant, when Kwame was drafted, went into his apartment to help him get ready for something, I think for an event, and saw a pile of coats in a corner and was like, "What's that?" He's like, "Those are my suits." And he's like, "Well, all of them? Like, it's huge." He had been buying a new suit every day because he didn't understand, like, he didn't know what to do with them. He didn't know to take them to the dry cleaners. They'd never done with that before, which that's what happens when you give a kid like millions of dollars and they don't know what to do. And so like these stories I think are illustrative, and just like so often the players that have made it have said how important those veterans are. You talked a lot about this. You obviously cover the Heat, where they obviously value this a lot with Udonis. What are your thoughts on the importance of keeping a veteran around if they're going to move that draft eligibility age back to 18?
I think it's awesome. I think it's fantastic. I think it's essential. I've done a lot of research on this for something I'm working on, and he talked to veterans that have been kind of forced out of the league, and it's a lot of the argument is that it's been basically boiled down to a financial decision. If you're going to bring in a guy like Isaiah Thomas or Udonis Haslem, the Heat being a very strange exception, even a Blake Griffin or somebody along those lines that's having a positive impact in the locker room, it's a financial decision, because you have to pay them a whole heck of a lot of more money, and maybe their impact on the court is not that significant. So why take that chance? Why not bring in a 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old on a two-way deal that's much, 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 much cheaper than a minimum veteran deal? And that's basically what it boils down to. Now you have a player who's 30, 31-ish, somewhere around that vicinity, without the opportunity to get back in the league. And by that point, then, a season goes by, a second season goes by, and they're basically aged out of the league. So to be able to establish that kind of clearly designated role, I think is fantastic. And yes, you make a great point about the leadership that these players bring. And I've seen Udonis up close, and even Heat fans are divided by it because, well, frankly, they're quite stupid about it. They see this missing roster spot. It's like, well, we could use this on another 21-year-old prospect, and maybe they'll stand out, or maybe they won't play at all. Maybe they'll get sent to the G League, where they'll spend most of their time, because that's what happens with a lot of 21-year-olds that are ready for a playoff push or ready for an 82-game season. In the meantime, you've got Udonis Haslem, who has been there for years and always makes a positive impact by virtue of practicing, of being a voice in the locker room, of getting guys to understand the nuts and bolts of day-to-day life in the NBA, of getting you to work harder so that you get paid. Everybody in the league wants to get paid. A guy like Udonis preaches that and has made it an example. He is an example of what it takes in order to have a long career in the NBA and become successful. It's so fantastic. Veterans all around, from I think Nikola Vucevic JJ Redick, others have talked about when they first entered the league, it seemed like you always had that one veteran at the end of the bench or somebody who was just a positive role model in the locker room to talk about all those things that you talked about with Kwame. Just how to get by, how to understand how to pack for a road trip, who to contact when you're looking for a place to stay, etc. You think the league handles all that, but it really doesn't. These players are just looking to survive when it comes to the NBA. They don't have time to figure out the things that you and I might take for granted in our daily life because they've got much bigger pressures about just being able to play 82 games. And so,
and the example I gave was extreme. Jeff Green hosted a mini camp for the Nuggets players, and then there were a bunch of young guys that were there. And a lot of what Jeff focused on was actually like, it's stuff about avoiding them because it's also, they're in predatory environments. They're young players that don't know any better with a lot of money, and people are always trying to get them involved in things and asking for things. Friends are asking for things, acquaintances, all these types of things. And so Jeff Green talked to them a lot about those kind of things. Cause when you're that young, you just don't know any better. There's no way I would know any better. Like so much of this stuff is just like common stuff that most kids aren't put through. You don't have any resources, so you got to find your way through. And so I just think it's really important to have those kinds of things available for them. The last thing that I want to mention is there's also talking about changing the extensions. I'm not going to get into the numbers here because it gets a little boring. The biggest thing that I think is kind of questionable on this is the extension talks could wind up impacting a couple of players, most notably Jaylen Brown, OG Anunoby, Domantas Sabonis, Lauri Markkanen. Those types of players are all going to be impacted by these kinds of extensions. They're trying to provide more opportunities for players that want to stay with their team, but the financial reality doesn't make sense for them to do so, but instead to enter free agency. If they want to stay and the team wants to keep them, there should be better ways to go ahead and lock that in. And I think ultimately that's a pretty good move for the league. Let's take a break. We'll come back and talk a little bit about the Eastern Conference as two teams got pretty big wins on Monday night. And so we'll talk about what exactly the East looks like. And is it really as kind of closed off as far as the Eastern title picture as it kind of seems? We'll do that when we come back on Locked On NBA. I've got to tell you about LinkedIn Jobs. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. Every new wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to best qualified candidates. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. So often in my experience, the hiring process can be random and frustrating and maddening, and it's not necessarily as refined and logical as it needs to be. And LinkedIn Jobs helps fill that gap. All you got to do is go on. You can use simple tools like the screening questions, which make it easy to focus on the candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnba. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnba to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. All right, final segment here on Locked On NBA for Tuesday. Thanks for joining us. David Ramil from Locked On Heat alongside me, Matt Moore. Speaking of the Heat, sure. So, okay, all right. They bottom out after the All-Star break, and everything looks terrible. So, of course, they turn around on Monday, and they beat the Sixers in Philly. Like, okay. Meanwhile, up north, the Knicks, who have been dreadful at home, get a monster win versus the Celtics and handle them. They led that entire game, led by double digits for most of it. They ended up winning 109-94. Julius Randle with 23 points, had 12 in the first quarter as they got off to that lead and really never looked back. Jason Tatum ejected from this game for double technicals. He was pretty mad about a call from the officiating. So my question for you here, and let's start with Miami, okay? Yeah. I'm always slow to write off teams with lots of playoff experience, but I kind of gotten to the point where I had written them off. And I'm not saying that one win versus the Sixers necessarily changes my mind on this, right. But I think it's like an interesting question of, we kind of assume that the East it's Milwaukee and Boston, and then that's it. And you can buy into the Sixers if you really want to, but there's kind of an idea, especially after Saturday, that like, the Sixers can't get past Boston. They just can't for whatever reason. It's bizarre. Are we sure about that? Right? The Knicks profile is really good, but I want to talk about Miami, whose profile, by the way, is not good. Like everything about Miami says that they're a bad team, a mediocre team, but we're getting into closer to the playoffs now. When we see, this is what everyone's kind of said. The reason everyone's been so reluctant to just dismiss Miami is they do have this real grinded out mentality. I've called them a factory of sadness team. Fountain of sadness team. And the fountain of sadness goes back to the Nets versus the Bulls in 2013. They won that series. Like there are these teams that are just refuse to let go of the mortal coil. I'll just ask you, like, as co-host of Locked On Heat, do we absolutely know the Heat cannot make a run? Do we know they can't make a run this year?
No, we don't. If you ask my co-host, he'd probably say very unlikely. He's much more pessimistic about it than I do, but I just see this team, and I know what Jimmy Butler has been capable of. And you know, even when they were the first seed, right? You know, seeding matters so much. And a lot of Heat fans are, you know, to use Eric Spoelstra's terminology, they've let go of the rope, and they are dreading the season. They're a play-in tournament team at best, whatever. They should blow up the team, etc. I just, you know, even last year when they were the first seed, I don't think anybody really took them seriously as a legitimate title contender. They wound up going all the way to the Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. And yeah, they got some luck along the way. What team doesn't? I've seen Jimmy play so much better than what we've seen from him. And maybe this is something that he's actively doing in terms of coasting through the regular season. He's still been very, very, very good. He's still, you know, one of the top 20 players in the league statistically. And when he is engaged, as he was tonight, he's very good. 1 assist shy of a triple-double. So I think they can beat a Milwaukee team, despite the fact that they just got blown out by 30. I think they can contend against the Celtics team in a 7-game series. Is it likely? Probably not. I mean, the talent disparity is great. But by that same token, Kevin Love gives them an added dimension. Cody Zeller, of all people, who's been out of the league for a year, played really good minutes off the bench. I don't know if you're a believer in Zeller or not. So look, there's a lot to like about that team. And yes, the playoff experience certainly helps if they can just continue to coalesce at the right moments over the next 20 games. Maybe they can catch somebody by surprise and you know, have a deeper run than expected.
Jimmy Butler a -1, Bam a -7, Gabe Vincent a -7, Hero was +3. It was really the bench that got it done in terms of how they won that game.
Yeah.
You know, this is the thing. I will say this. So I learned this from the 2010 Celtics, the 10 through 12 Celtics. There are these teams that are experienced enough that will just, it's a boxer that doesn't ever let you get a big punch in. Right. They just stay real close to you and they only work the body and they never let you get a big punch in. You never get a big combination in. And they hug you and they wear you out. And then late in the rounds, that's when they start to just catch you as you're getting tired. That's where they hit you. The Mavs honestly are built a little bit like this with worse defense. They play so slow that their entire thing is like, if we can just keep within a couple of possessions, then we can close down the stretch. The Heat are built very similar with, like, if we can just muck this game up.
Spo talks about it all the time. That's perfectly said. They muck it up. We play in the mud. That's how we like it. Spo loves that sort of stuff. Yeah,
muck it up, play, and then just keep it close and slow. And then you got Jimmy Butler, who is so phenomenal in those tight moments. Like, he's the difference maker. Yeah. The Knicks, meanwhile, I think are really interesting from the perspective of the profile on that team is just like, it's way better than people realize.
Yeah.
Like everyone's so used to the Knicks being a joke. Like, look, the Knicks are 6th in schedule adjusted offense, 15th in schedule adjusted defense. They're 7th in overall net rating schedule adjusted. The Knicks are good. Like, they're just good. I don't really like, a lot of it is the bench. They're getting great minutes from Quickly and Toppin and those guys. Josh Hart has brought them a different dynamic. This game was obviously like a weird performance by the Celtics because they've been so dominant, but really, when we kind of dig into this, like, okay, the Knicks are very likely to wind up in either the 4-5 or, like, they're going to be 5 or 6. That's what's going to happen. The Cavs are enough ahead. It's probably going to be Knicks in the 5 or 6. But, like, it's interesting if they get into the 4-5, right? Because you get into 4-5 and you got the Cavaliers, who are an inexperienced team that don't have any experience playing in the playoffs together. and the Knicks have nothing to lose. They have nothing to lose. Nobody expects them to go anywhere. If they wind up in the 6th spot versus the Sixers, you have the Sixers with James Harden and Doc Rivers and Joel Embiid and all that pressure. Like, the Knicks are in prime position. Like, this is the thing with the Knicks and the Heat. No one expects anything of them versus all these other teams where when things get tight, we don't know how they're going to react. Boston, I think we can trust. Milwaukee, we feel like we can, but Milwaukee tends to go cold at the worst times. So all I'm saying is there will be surprises in these playoffs. It's not going to go chalk. It never does. Like, it goes mostly chalk. This is the NBA. But it's not going to go entirely chalk. And I kind of wonder if the Heat and the Knicks are two teams that maybe we're overlooking when we talk about the Eastern Conference. And if one of those teams is going to ruin somebody's season by sneaking up and biting them and going deeper into the playoffs than we kind of expect.
It's interesting you bring up the Knicks that way because, you're talking about Miami. And one of the things that everybody always considers is, they've had these playoff experiences, Jimmy, Bam, etc. At the same time, the Knicks, they've got some playoff experience, but not nearly as much as really. Miami does. But that kind of just willingness to say, you know what, nobody does expect us to be here. That certainly is a big motivator to just say, let's just play loose. We're not worried about this. Let's see how far we can take this. And that's where you gain that kind of experience. And all it takes is that one upset to build that kind of confidence and momentum. And all of a sudden, you're much more dangerous than anybody had expected you to be. So that's an interesting point there I hadn't considered.
All right, let's get wrap it up for Locked On NBA for Tuesday. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Make sure to check out Wednesday's show. You got John Corrales and Jake Madison bringing you the best from coast to coast. Then on Thursday, you got Pat the Designer and Nick Angstadt. And on Friday, Wes Goldberg, co-host with David, and Adam Mares, who's co-host with me. They're teamed up on Friday's show as well. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Thanks for joining us, everybody, making this your first listen. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On NBA.